Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. We are snowed in, sort of, here in Iowa. It was supposed to be a massive storm. It turned out to be lame. And they even canceled our kids' basketball, which was unnecessary. It's like my favorite thing to watch on the weekend. But let's start off with Your Financial Pharmacist are giving away 10 copies of 100 Strong Residency Interview Questions, Answers, and Rationales. You can get a chance at the giveaway at yourfinancialpharmacist.com/giveaway. Again, they're going to give 10 away, and I think there's just 10 days left before they give that book away. So it kind of speaks to what I want to talk about today, which is dealing with a massive income loss. And both Tim Ulbrich and Tim Church, I believe, were down about $200,000. So it wasn't necessarily a massive income loss, but it was certainly an income takeaway, or they were not able to use a lot of their income until they paid that off. And I think Tim Church just paid his off a couple weeks ago, and I know Tim Ulbrich had done it the same. And something that they had done, they did in the right order, which is what I want to talk to you about today, and that's dealing with a massive income loss. And I'll give some examples of what I mean, because I'm dealing with one now, and I know it's coming for 2019 and that it's going to hit pretty hard. We dealt with medication last year, where we had a biologic that we have to pay for out of pocket. And this year, the loss is going to be 5 times what that was. So we thought that was bad, but this is even worse. What the Tims did right is that they had the right order. The right order when you're trying to do something where you want to, make money, or you want to succeed financially or in other ways, is to give, then ask, then receive. And what I mean by that is that Tim and Tim have been giving away content, have been giving away services, have been helping people way before they were in a position where financially they could help them as much as they can now. And it was that continuous giving over a consistent time period that's helped expand not only their reach and the number of people that they can help, but they're just in a much better position than they were before, because now those debts are gone. And if they're still making the same as they did, then certainly it's a lot easier to live your life without that $200,000 in debt over your head. The first thing, though, that when you run into something like this is that you think, I need to start asking and getting, and then I'll give back to those people that help me. And I understand that. When you have a catastrophic loss, the first thing you want to think about is you're kind of upset. You want people to help you. You want to have them help you get out of this. And the last thing you're thinking is that I have to give more value to other people. I have to help other people. So the first and most important lesson is that you give, ask, receive regardless, not ask, receive, and reciprocate. That's just not how things work. So let me talk about some catastrophic examples that might be hit closer to home for you guys, and then I'll talk about mine generally, not really the specifics. But the first thing is that some of you are graduating and you're getting 32 hours. Or some of you are graduating and not getting any hours. What I mean is some are having a little bit of trouble, maybe finding a position where they wanted, and they're not sure what to do. There are others that will fail the NAPLEX, and that will be, I want to say it's about 2,000 people every year that fail the NAPLEX. You're going to lose your job, or your job that you had lined up. With residency, I think it's up to the residency director. I'm just not sure. But almost every contract that I've talked to people about has said you have to be able to get a license within 90 days of graduation. Well, the issue with that is that the NAPLEX retake is 90 days after you. I don't know if it's 90 days after you get your score back or it's 90 days after you take it, but I think there's a 2-week delay. So either way, if you have a 90-day in your contract, I assure you there is someone that's licensed that will be able to take your position. And with what I'm hearing, and this kind of depends on where you are, but I've heard as many as 80 to 100 applications for single positions in a couple of positions. And that's just terrifying to me. If I were to go, I wouldn't, it's just not a good time to kind of brush off my degree and go back in. I just wouldn't do it right now. It's not a good time for many reasons. I have 3 kids, and they're at a point where I want to be with them quite a bit. Second, you might not have been expecting to do a PGY1, and you might have kind of banked on the regular salary of a pharmacist, and you did get a position, and maybe it's 32 hours, maybe it's 40 hours, whatever it is. But then you decided that you're going for residency, and all of a sudden you're going to be making 40 to 50, and that's a very different place to be than being closer to maybe 190, whatever it's going to be. And so maybe you weren't planning on that. Or maybe you were planning to get a job after PGY1 and you're realizing now that you have to do PGY2 to get the position you really want. Some people are doing fellowship after PGY2. I don't think it's called PGY3. I've heard that term, but I've just never really actually met a PGY3. That would be kind of cool. But maybe you're going back after a traditional salary. We just heard episode where I want to say it was on RX Radio where he interviewed someone who went back and had a traditional position, wasn't satisfied with that traditional position, went back to fellowship because residency has now become a barrier to getting certain positions, especially if you want to be in the hospital. For Google had a change in how they kind of sorted out sites and how people discovered you, and that can be impactful. My hit was from Amazon/Audible, where they're changing reimbursement model, and I want to not complain because I'm getting these royalties and all of that, but I can't help but feel a loss because I had something and now that's halved, and it just hurts. And I know that I know for sure now that the new reimbursement model, I simply can't work under the way that I was doing things. I have to change course, and I'll talk about how I've changed course in a number of different ways. This might be a little bit of a shocker, but I really think of individuals when I think of this kind of massive loss, but colleges of pharmacy have experienced a 25% loss in applications from last year to this. And I really don't know how they're going to deal with it, but that is a massive, massive amount to lose in a single year. Now, 25% reduction in applications does not mean 25% reduction in enrollment. It's probably closer to 15 to 18%. But still, when you think about the lifetime value of a student, even just those 4 years, if you're talking, I think the average is around, I want to say 40 grand for privates, 30 grand for publics. Each 10 students you lose is $4 million per year, right? So you're talking about, let me make sure I did that math. Well, I can't get to my keyboard, but I'm pretty sure that math is right. Let's see, 40, 1, 2, 3 times, nope, that's 4 times 10, right? Yeah, so $400,000. So $400,000 for every 10 students you lose. And then you lose that times 4. So that's what I was kind of thinking. So 1.6 million that you would have otherwise had over those 4 years. And budgets at pharmacy schools are different. So there's pharmacy schools that are just pharmacy schools, and that's just the only thing that's on campus. So to them, that's absolutely catastrophic. to lose that. Others are part of a broader university, and it's just a bad couple years for them, and it's going to get better for them once the other schools kind of decide what they want to do, I think. But I don't know, how are they going to handle it? Do they raise tuition on the students that are already there? Many schools have promised that, made that 4-year promise to say your tuition won't go up as you come here. Are they going to remove inefficiencies? Like, is there some duplication that they can get rid of? Are they going to lay off faculty? I don't know. Are we going to have these combination of schools the way that independents have kind of been taken up by, some of the big chains? Are they going to close schools? I just don't know. But I know that this is the year that they're kind of stuck because some of the schools are at 100% acceptance or very close to it, and they just can't accept more. Like, they can't make it 110%. There's just no one more to accept. And it's become pretty clear that they're in a frenzy because I'm seeing the very first thing that you see on the pharmacy school's webpage is you don't have to take the PCAT anymore. Or we're seeing things like that being blasted out to email lists where students that were thinking about applying are applying to so few schools, it's down to close to 2 per student, that they're removing any possible barrier. And this doesn't mean that there aren't great schools and great students going to those schools. But what I'm seeing is you're definitely in a good position now to get into the school that you want, much more so than you would have been 10 years ago. So I'm interested to see how they do that. But pharmacy schools are experiencing this catastrophic loss now of 25% of their applications. And then, we ran into this last year where we had this non-covered medication that, we couldn't do anything because of the way that we have to add. Not only do we have to add another insurance that we didn't need, now we're double covered, and that's maybe good, maybe bad. We'll see, but it just is brutal. And then my reimbursement I mentioned is being halved, and again, it was in the contract. There should have been no expectation on my part that it continued this year. It's just not there anymore, and I have to deal with it. So the second part of this episode is talking about, okay, so now we've got one of these catastrophic losses. What's the first thing that we want to do? And something the pharmacy schools did is they did a really good job of this, or the ones that are going to succeed did a really good job of this. And they said, how can I help people more? Or how can I help more people in a greater diverse group of people? The pharmacy schools that I think are going to survive or succeed are the ones that are more like a health sciences group, so that they have maybe a medical school coming, or they have some kind of other programs that they're adding, whether it's a bachelor's degree in health science or PT, OT, nursing, those kinds of things. With pharmacy, it had been such a kind of a solid rock for so long, as had law schools, that it was just kind of shocking when this happened. But it's just like the housing market, as you saw everything going crazy, exponentially up, as you see this exponential rise in schools, something had to give. If you live in Georgia, I think, although you represent like the contiguous states, it's like you represent, like, I want to say a little less than, I want to say it's a little over, somewhere between 10 and 15% of the country's population. But you have 1/4 of the pharmacy schools in that bottom right corner of the country. And then, the news that Florida just took away or suspended licenses of people, pharmacists and other practitioners that were not able to pay back their student loans. That just is mind-boggling, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the first thing is the first lesson is, how do I help people more, or how do I help a greater group of people? Now, if you're in a pharmacy working, you're like, well, helping more people at the pharmacy doesn't help. And that's why, you had really want to listen to the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I think they do a great job talking about side hustles and things like that. Or Blair Thielemeyer with MTM, RX Ashley on Aaron Albert. Definitely recommend those. TLDR does a great job of kind of showing you how that should be done. MedEd 101's Eric Christensen, Fit Pharmacist Adam Martin. So your YFP team, those guys have regular pharmacy jobs and are continuing to help other people. So you need to help other people outside of the place that you work. That's kind of a bottom line, I think. It's counterintuitive to help others when you're feeling bad about yourself. And the other thing is that, so you're at, let's give the example of being at the kind of the poker table. You've got a certain number of chips and your chip stack has been halved. Do you put your chips in and double down and go all in and out? Or do you say, this game had been good for me for a while and right now it's not. I think I need to go to another game, learn it, start off a little slow, but you're going to have to increase your acceptance of mistakes. And I think that's one of the toughest things to do is to get competent at something else, because the learning curve, you've been in pharmacy for so long that a learning curve for something else is just absolutely brutal. I'll give you my example where I want to say started becoming a writer. But my first kind of entry into it was taking a literature class. I'm like, what are these essays? What is going on here? Like, where's the multiple choice? Am I going to fail this class? And it was very organic the way that, I kind of got into the writing, but I got to tell you, I felt very uncomfortable when I first started, okay, thesis, 3 points of evidence, transition sentence, make sure your paragraphing is good. How do you read, like I'm taking another class this semester, but how do you read, 7 hours worth of book, in the audio book, and then compare it to 2 hours worth of movie, those kinds of things. And it's just such a different part of your brain. But on the other side, once you get like a little victory and you start getting good at it, it's a lot of fun. So I started thinking about other things I'm good at and just started publishing. So I think action is much better than inaction. You're like, okay, well, I want to open a coffee shop. All right, we'll go work at Starbucks. No. See, I make $50 an hour, or I make $75 an hour, or whatever it is. No, what you want to do is think of it as, okay, I'm going to get paid to be trained in this side hustle that I want to start. And that's kind of where you want to put your mindset. I just started publishing, like I did an interview book addition to the Residency interview book, just as a supplement to kind of say, okay, well, this was something that I missed in the book and that we can add and give more value to something I already have. I wireframed a medical terminology book, which I'll turn into an audio book, but as I kind of looked at it, I realized it really needed some work, and so that's going to take some time, and it's just super hard with as many classes as I teach. I teach 4 and 4, so 4 each semester. And then I'm looking at pharmacology for medication aids. I'm kind of figuring out how I would present that to someone who hasn't had any chemistry at all, much less any college at all. In many cases, medication aids I've just graduated from high school, and that's the end of their education. So it's a very different mindset. But what matters is that I'm just taking action, kind of learning where my niche is going to be. I mentioned this in a previous episode about hitting singles, and this is my second point. So my first point is to make sure that you're focusing on giving value to others, even though you feel sorry for yourself. And I mentioned the Diamondbacks World Series, I think it was 2001, where at the end of the game, you got Mariano Rivera at the top, who's just, I even think I knew the number at the time. I don't remember what it was, but I think he was like 120-1 in the ninth inning when leading. Just an immense mountain to climb. And what the Diamondbacks did throughout the game was they just put in each player, Randy Johnson for a couple, Kurt Schilling for a couple innings, even just one inning, and they just kept the score where it was. And then it was single after single, and it was a single that drove in the winning run in Game 7 of the World Series, Diamondbacks against the Yankees in Phoenix. And it was amazing to see. It was amazingly loud. You can't really get that kind of loudness on a YouTube video or something like that. But I remember how I was just hoarse after that game. And long story short, it was just a cool thing to be. But it's really tough to hit singles when a home run is what you really want. But what you really want is to make sure that you get home. And sometimes getting home means doing those singles. And so I've added another 2,500 a year as I've started off the year. And you know, when I know that my loss is actually about 10 to 12 times that for this year, it's kind of hard. Just like it's going to be very hard for you to accept that you've got another 2,500 a year when you're saying, all right, well, I lost 8 hours of pharmacist salary, and here I'm getting like another 200 a month or another 300 a month, and it's tough to not say, man, that really hurts. That doesn't feel good. But it's not to dismiss a small victory. It's what clawing back looks like. It's just like the Tims crawled back from 200,000 down, and they've had a number of people on their show. If you haven't listened to the YFP podcast, it's amazing. These comebacks that you're hearing of, you know, hundreds of thousands in debt, and the way that they've come back, and they've actually felt better about it than if they did have all that money. It's just part of the learning curve. Now, I'm relatively positive in my next direction and the next book, as positive as I can be, but I'm busy. I got 3 7-year-olds. I've got obligations to the work that I do now, and I've got obligations to my students, and I've got obligations to the APPE student and J-term student that I have, but I'm rapidly making mistakes, I guess is what I'm saying, and because I'm making these mistakes so fast, it's getting me, or it's gotten me to where I want to be, which is, okay, what's the direction of the next big investment? So I'll put $5,000 into this one, this book, and put a ton of value in it. But it was just a matter of taking all of these little hits, seeing all of these little wrong directions, so that I can see, okay, this is where I need to go. So number 1 was, again, adding value to others. Number 2, working on hitting singles, not having to shoot for the moon until you're really ready. And then number 3 is avoiding the cocoon. Man, when you're down, you do not want to talk to other people about it. Well, some people do. I don't, but some people do. And I heard something about Facebook where if you like other people's posts and they keep having like great things happen, which is what people post. Hey, I just lost 50 pounds and congratulations to, well, she knows who she is. Congratulations to her that did. I want to say she's up to 60 pounds. And you're like, man, I started the year off and I stopped going to the gym already, and it's the 3rd week of January. You're actually supposed to write something. That makes you feel better. So when you write someone and congratulate them versus just putting a like. So with the likes, you're just saying, great, another victory for someone else and not me. Great, another victory and someone else, not me. But when you write your content down and you say, hey, you know, that's really great for you, for some reason it triggers someplace different in your brain and it makes you feel much, much better. I don't know why one drops serotonin, one spikes serotonin, but that's the key. Just make sure that you write something nice and support them. Other people are getting hit hard by this pharmacist job market, but the rest of the market's doing great. Remember, people hire people that are working, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that with avoiding the cocoon, and here's why. So part of that cocoon is not taking a job because you feel beneath it, you feel it's not making enough money or something like that. And I want to tell you why people hire people that are working. So let's just start if someone went to Harvard. I know there's no Harvard pharmacy school. Then an employer sees that they've already been admitted and they beat a number of people. And so by having gone to Harvard, they're like, okay, well, they're probably pretty good academically because they beat out these other people. It's kind of similar to, as someone's been in the military, there's a resilience that an employer can count on. There's a willingness to show up, a willingness to get up early, those kinds of things. And it's just something that it looks fantastic on the resume, but it also speaks to their giving and that they put their country and others before themselves. And now they're asking for a position, and now they'll receive the position. So that's kind of my second. And then the third, if somebody's employed, that means someone else has hired them. above other people that were applying for the job. So it's a lot easier to say, oh, you're working somewhere, than somebody hired you, versus, okay, you're not working, then what's wrong with you? Am I missing something? It's the same thing with a house that has many days on market. If someone overprices it and it stays on the market too long, nobody wants to get part of that because they're like, well, there's something wrong with it that I'm missing. And it might have been just that they overpriced it. And it's really hard for a real estate agent to say, I'm not going to list your home at this price because I know it's way over what it should be. And then they lose the person, and then somebody else gets it and has the difficult conversations, but ends up selling it because then it goes down. So it just kind of goes to, if you're working, it's a lot easier to get hired, and that's my recommendation. Plus, for whatever reason, I just don't know. You are in a different mindset where you're at least working than you are if you're at home. I can't stand being at home not working. So what about your student loans, though? How do you take a job that doesn't pay as much with your student loans? And this is where your financial pharmacist guys are probably much better than I on this. If you're in with the federal loans and you haven't, I think, if you haven't refinanced, then there are income-based options. But even if you have refinanced, you want to be in touch with your lender, write down everything, every communication with your lender, even if they turn you down, just so that you can say, if you ever do end up in front of a judge or something like that, like, look, I've been working really hard I've taken these positions, I've worked at these jobs, I asked the lender, they said no, and I've still continued to pay this amount, although it wasn't what I was supposed to. And I just know that a recent article came out in Florida about the suspended license, and it was a little overstated. There were 900 people that had this issue, and I don't know if it was in the entire state of Florida. It's a ginormous state. But 100 of them had suspended licenses because they didn't work something out. So it went all the way from like CNA, who owed $9,000, to Pharmacist, who owed probably a lot more than that. But the thing is to keep in constant communication and not try to run from it. So I know this was supposed to be uplifting, but here are my 3 points. If you have a massive income loss, the first thing to do is to start helping other people and find where you want to give value. Because a 60-hour week making or an 80-hour week making half as much at 2 jobs is not terrible if you're giving value to people in a way that you want to. It's actually probably even better than a 40-hour job where you don't want to be there. Number 2, start by hitting some singles and start by getting some small victories. You can swing for the home run, and people can say, oh, that was a good try, but clawing back from a massive income loss starts with small victories. And then along the way, when you're not expecting it, there'll be a huge victory. And my accountant a long time ago told me about this. He's like, what you need are kills, man. I was like, what is a financial kill? He's like, well, you just keep at it. You just kind of keep trying things, and then eventually something just kind of hits, and it works out. And I can't explain it, but it just is. So hitting singles until you do, get to where you want to be. And then number 3, avoid the cocoon. Reach out to people who can help you and talk to them, because they probably actually want someone to talk to also. And being out of the cocoon is a much better place to be. So, all right. Well, again, hope you enjoyed this episode. Please do take the time to write a review if you like on iTunes. And if you need any help from me, you can always reach me on my email, aaguerra@dmac.edu, or on Facebook at TonyFarmD1.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.